I am Bismarck Osei, a final year PhD candidate at the University of Ghana, Department of Economics. I'm a lecturer at Zeno University College where I teach economics. I'm a former senior high school teacher who used to teach economics and also a WAEC examiner. In this lesson, we're going to look at lesson 12, and in lesson 12, we're going to look at the elasticity of demand. Let's look at the outline of the lesson. We're going to look at the introduction, the price elasticity of demand, the definition, the types of price elasticity of demand, the determinants of price elasticity of demand, or the factors that determine price elasticity of demand, the formula, the calculations. Look at the usefulness of price elasticity of demand. Right? Here too, you're going to have another type, income elasticity of demand. You're going to look at the definition, the calculation, and the calculations on income elasticity of demand. As you're going to look at the types of income elasticity of demand, and look at what is the uses. Why is the income elasticity of demand estimate? Why is it useful? Okay. So you're going to look at the cross elasticity of demand. You're going to look at the definition and the calculation of cross elasticity of demand. You're going to look at the types of cross elasticity of demand. You're going to find out why is the cross elasticity of demand the estimates. Why is it useful? Why is it useful? Okay. Then after that, we will wrap it up with a data response question, so that we try to tease out these intuitions and concepts to see how we can able to solve our data response question. So I want you to, it's a very lengthy lesson. I want you to follow it very, very well. We go through all these things and understand these nitty-gritties that borders on these topics very extensively. It's a very important topic, not only for the classroom, not only for the WAEC exams, it's also even the knowledge for your private life, everyday private life. It's also very important. So follow this lesson very closely. So we want to look at the elasticity of demand. Before that, we want to look at what is the general idea when it comes to elasticity of demand before you go down to the three types of elasticities. So what's the elasticity of demand? It refers to the degree or the magnitude of the responsiveness of changes in quantity demand as a result of changes in either price, income, or price of related commodity. So when you say price elasticity of demand, what does it refer to? When you say elasticity of demand, here our emphasis is on elasticity of demand before we come back and take the types and explain them one by one. It basically means that it shows the extent to which demand changes whenever there's a change in either price of the commodity, income, or price of related products. Remember in lesson 7, we spoke about factors that influence demand. In this lesson, we want to find out, let's take for instance, price. We know that whenever price goes up, quantity demand falls, right? That one we know it. But we don't know the magnitude, the percentage, the degree. So the elasticity of demand tells us the magnitude or the degree. For instance, if price goes up by maybe 10%, if price increase by 10%, demand will fall. Demand will fall by what? Demand will fall by maybe 20%. Right? So in this lesson, we are trying to be more specific. We want to know the magnitude by which price and demand will fall. When we were treating demand, all that we got to know is that whenever price goes up, demand will fall. When price goes down, demand will go up. That was all. But we didn't know the magnitude, the extent to which it will change. Will it change by 30% or 20% or 50%? We didn't know that, right? So this topic is giving us more information than what we did on demand. It's just a build up. If, for instance, you have two consumers, consumer A and B, if the price of a product they are selling goes up by 10%, right? Maybe consumer A will increase his consumption by maybe 30%, consumer B will increase his consumption by 40%. So when price goes down, these two consumers are increasing their demand, but now we know the magnitude. It's not just saying they will increase the demand, but we know the magnitude. A will increase his demand by 30%, B will increase his demand by 40%. And that's what elasticity is about. It's the degree or the magnitude. It's telling you the extent By what magnitude will you change your demand? Will you change it by 50%, 80%, 100%, 20%, so that we can now tell you the true story of what is going on? When we talk about elasticity of demand, there are three categories, three types of elasticity of demand. One, we have the price elasticity of demand. We have the income elasticity of demand. We have the cross elasticity of demand. We have all these three types of elasticity. So the elasticity of demand, we have three types. You're going to take them one by one, solve questions, and understand all the concepts. We have the price elasticity of demand, we have the income elasticity of demand, and the cross elasticity of demand. So elasticity itself is a broad topic that tells you how consumers change their quantity they buy whenever there's a change in price, either price, income, or price of related commodity. So we are not going to take the first type, which is called the price elasticity of demand. Okay? So price elasticity of demand is defined as the degree of responsiveness of changes in quantity demand to changes in the price of the commodity. So it talks about what? The degree of what? Responsiveness to which consumers will change the quantity they demand when there's a change in what? Price. Keywords. So it talks about the degree of responsiveness, the degree to which consumers will change the quantity they are demanding whenever there's a change in price. And as I was explaining to you, when we're dealing with the concept, the theory on demand, we got to understand that whenever price goes up, consumers buy less, right? But we didn't know the magnitude. That maybe if price goes up, consumers will buy less. They'll buy less by what magnitude? Maybe if you have two consumers, consumer A and B, if the price goes up, consumer A will buy less by maybe 50%, consumer B will buy less by maybe 40%. So even though they are all demanding less, the magnitude is different. The degree, the magnitude, the percentage. So it's the percentage. So people say that it's a degree or is the magnitude, or people say the percentage. So it's the degree of responsiveness. How does your demand responds to change in price? If price increase by 10%, how will your demand respond? Will your demand increase by, will your demand fall by 40%, or your demand will fall by 80%, or your demand will fall by 100%? So we see the different degrees, or to which a consumer's change in quantity demand responds to changes in price. So just try to think about it. When you go to the mall and something you buy in the market, the price have gone up by 10 or 20 cedis, 10 or 20%. It have gone up by 20%. What do? Are you going to decrease the demand by 10% or 5% or 10 or 2%? Nobody knows. If you are taking two consumers, maybe you reduce yours by 15%, somebody reduces his own by 5%. So that's where the elasticity comes in different degrees, different magnitude, to which consumers will change their demand whenever price increases. So let's go down and know more things about elasticity, price elasticity of demand. We have 5 types of price elasticity of demand. We have the first type, we have the elastic demand, or what they call fairly elastic demand. What does it mean? It means that the percentage change in quantity demand by consumers is always greater than the percentage change in the price. For example, when price increased by 20%, the quantity demand will fall by, maybe the quantity demand will fall by 30%. With elastic demand, when they say commodity have elastic demand, it means that anytime price changes, the change in quantity demand is always greater than the change in price. For instance, you are buying wheat, you went that the price of wheat have gone up by 10%. Then reduce the amount you are buying by 30%. Or the price has reduced by 5%. Then you increase the amount you are buying by 40%. That means your demand for wheat, you the consumer, your demand for wheat is elastic. So when we say a commodity you buy has elastic demand, it means that the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. Maybe you buy wheat, or maybe you buy cornflakes. and you discover that the product has elastic demand. What does it mean? It means that the commodity is very, very sensitive to changes in price. So if price increase by a small margin, a lot of people will stop buying the product. If the price decrease by a small margin, a lot of people will come and buy the product. That means that the commodity is highly sensitive. The slightest changes in price brings about a large change in the demand. The demand can either increase or decrease, right? So when they say a commodity have that type of elastic demand, it means that it has elasticity greater than 1. For instance, let's take, maybe you are buying 2 products. You're buying, let's say the COVID-19. Let's look at the vaccines that we have on board, right? COVID-19, let's assume. Let's take this AstraZeneca and Moderna, right? Let's take these 2 commodities. They are perfect substitute, right? Assuming that a country wants to go and buy these vaccines. If the country goes and the price of Moderna have increased by maybe 5%, they reduce, because they are substitutes, what would they do? They reduce their demand for this by large margin. Maybe if price increase of Moderna increase by 5%, probably they reduce their consumption of Moderna or demand for Moderna by maybe 50%. And shift that money to go and buy more of AstraZeneca, right? So commodities that have substitute behave that way. The slightest increase in the price of one will lead to a large change in that commodity because the commodity has substitute. If Pepsodent and Close-Up is on the market, they are all 5 cedis. And you go there, Pepsodent have gone up by 5 to 6 cedis. A lot of people will shift their demand from Pepsodent and go and buy Close-Up. That means that a small change in price, if the price of Pepsodent increased by even 10%, it's possible demand will fall by maybe more than 40 or 50%. That means that the demand for Pepsodent is very sensitive to changes in price. Where if price increase or fall by a small margin, it brings about a large change in its demand. Later, we're going to look at what are some of the factors that cause these when we are finished talking about these types of elasticities. So the elastic demand, or what we call fairly elastic demand, is when the commodity, the percentage change in quantity demand by the consumer is higher than the percentage change in price. Meaning that the commodity is very sensitive. The slightest changes in price brings about a large change in the demand. If price increase by a small margin, demand will increase. If price increase by a small margin, demand will fall by a large margin. Maybe price increase by 5%, demand will fall by maybe 30% because maybe the product has substitute. A lot of people will shift from that product and go and buy a substitute. And that results in a large change in the quantity demand, right? And I gave you an example of using the Moderna and AstraZeneca as a vaccine for COVID-19. We gave that. And also, let's look at the diagram too. With elastic demand, the elasticity is always greater than 1. For instance, when the price increases by 20%, the quantity demand will fall by 30%. That means the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. In Ghana, for instance, we have Coke and Pepsi. About 4 or 5 years ago, the price of Coke increased from 1 cedi to 1 cedi 20 pesos, while the price of Pepsi remained the same. And what happened was that a lot of people stopped buying Coke for programs and shifted to buy that of Pepsi, which tells you that the demand for Coke is very elastic. They increased the price from 1 cedi to 1 cedi 20 pesos, and a lot of people shifted. There was a large fall in the demand for Coke because the price of Pepsi was the same. That tells you that the demand for Pepsi by consuming, demand for Pepsi is very elastic. That's one typical example you can actually even lead to it. And let's look at a diagram. Whenever you have elastic demand, the elasticity is always greater than 1. And later you understand what elasticity is greater than 1, meaning that the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. That's what it means. And later we're going to use calculations, we're going to solve to understand how these things work when you're using calculations. Let's see the diagram. What does the diagram mean? Then in the diagram, you see that first the price was at P2, the quantity demand, the price was at P1 here. At P1, the quantity demand was Q1, and that's the demand curve. The price falls to P2. Look at it, and then look at it. There's a large change in demand. The price just falls by this small margin, and there is a large change in quantity demand. So the demand curve here is more flatter. Why is it flatter? It's flatter because the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. In that case, we say that the commodity has elastic demand. So you start examining the things you buy on the market. If the things you buy on the market is very sensitive to changes in price, then you can say that the commodity has elastic demand. After understanding price elasticity of demand, the definition, we want to go on to types of price elasticity of demand. So we have 5 types of price elasticity of demand. One, we have what we call the elastic or fairly elastic demand. When do we say that a commodity has elastic demand? When the percentage change in quantity demanded is always greater than the percentage change in price. For instance, when the price of the commodity increased by 20%, the quantity demanded will fall by 30%. In that case, what do you see? It means that whenever there's a change in price, the change in quantity demanded is higher than the change in price. If the commodity price falls by maybe 10%, demand will increase maybe by 40 or 50%. In other words, it means that the commodity is highly sensitive to changes in price. The slightest change in price will bring about a large change in demand. If the price decreases by a small margin, demand will rise by a large margin. If the price goes up by a small margin, demand will fall by a large margin. That means if you buy a commodity in the market that behaves that way, that means the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. The slightest changes in price brings about a higher change in demand. A typical example in Ghana, for instance, I think about 6 years ago, we have Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And Coca-Cola increased its price from I think 1 cedi to 1 cedi 20 pesos, and the price of Pepsi was the same. A lot of people stopped buying Coca-Cola for programs and shifted to buy Pepsi. Why? Because they felt that they can use Pepsi in place of Coca-Cola. So even an increase in the price by just 20 pesos, it made Coca-Cola experience a large change, a large fall in its demand. So any product that behave that way, especially the product that are substitutes, behave that way. Because they are substitute, the slightest change in the price brings about a large change in the demand because people can switch to a substitute. In that case, such commodity, we say that the demand for such commodity is elastic. So any commodity that is very highly sensitive to changes in price, we say the demand for that product is elastic. So look at the things you buy. When there's a change in price, how do you behave towards that thing? And see whether the things you buy on the market is it elastic or inelastic. So let's see. So let's use this diagram to explain the point here. What do we see here? Here, remember we have our price line here. We have our origin. We have the quantity, right? So we have our demand curve here. Let's assume that price was at 2. When price was at 2, if you trace the price down to the demand, we're going to have Q2. That's quantity 2. When price reduced to P1, what happened? Demand, if you trace the P1 to the demand curve, the demand increases to Q1. What do you see? A slight change in price has brought a large change in quantity demand. So here the demand curve is more or less, it's more flatter. It's flatter. You see that the demand curve is more flatter. It's flatter because the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. And when a commodity have elastic demand, it means that the elasticity is greater than 1. So when they say any commodity have elastic demand, elasticity is greater than 1, it means that the commodity is very, very sensitive to changes in price. So always the percentage change in quantity demand is always greater than the percentage change in price. That's what it means at this stage. Later, we will take questions to solve and see when the elasticity will be greater than 1 or less than 1. Let's also look at this. The opposite of elastic demand is the inelastic demand. So you want to go inelastic demand, or what we call the fairly elastic demand, fairly inelastic demand. So either you say a product, either you say it's inelastic demand, or you can say fairly inelastic demand. It's the same thing. What does it mean? It means that the percentage change in quantity demanded is always less than the percentage change in price. For instance, if the price increased by 30%, quantity demand will fall by 10%. In that case, so assuming a product, the price increased by 30%, but demand fall only by 10%. That means the commodity is not highly sensitive to change in price. So change in price does not affect its demand so much. Even though demand will fall, it does not fall by so much. Why? For instance, maybe the good is a necessity. Maybe you are renting a room in here in Accra where people rent 2-bedroom for 500 Ghana cedis a month. If next month the landlord is saying, want to increase it from 500 to 700, what will you do? You have no option to still buy it. So your demand for that product is not sensitive to price. Or you relocate. If all landlords are saying they're charging that amount of money, what do you have? No option but to keep on buying. Or people will relocate from Accra to other place. How many people? A few people will cut down their demand because some people cannot relocate. So goods that are substitute. For instance, the doctor have asked you to buy a drug that you need to take every month. You went, the price was $10, the price have increased to $60. What will you do? You are supposed to take that drug every month. Will you say that because the price have gone up so you will die? Certainly not. You will try to maybe if you're going to buy 20, maybe you buy 15 or 16, and yes, you demand it. So such commodity, we say they are inelastic demand. They are not too sensitive to changes in price, especially when there's an increase in price. The people who stop buying are very few. A lot of people keep on buying. So we say that commodity is inelastic, or what is it, fairly inelastic. So it's the opposite of elastic. So any commodity that's not highly sensitive to change in price. If any price increases, few people stop buying, a lot of people keep on buying, that commodity is said to have inelastic demand. So wrap your mind around it, the things you buy on the market or the street. See which of these goods falls categorically into these elastic or inelastic demand. It's very practical. It's not only for writing the exams, but for everyday life. Later, I'm going to tell you the importance of these intuition about price elasticity, what it means to you as an individual, as tax expert, the government, and international trade policy expert. You are trying to actually effectuate the relevance of these things. So let's see here. Let's use this diagram to depict what they call the inelastic demand. First, the price was at P2 and the quantity demanded was Q2. The price reduced to P1 and demand increased by Q1. Let's see. So if you trace the P1 line to the demand line and you trace it here, what do I have? Q1. What does it mean? Look at it. Look at the space. The change in price is higher than the change in demand. You can do it vice versa. Where price increases, you can have the same thing. The price was at P1 and people were demanding Q1, right? The price increased to P2. Demand falls. If you P2, you trace the P2 down to the quantity line, you're going to get Q2. So this is the P2. Trace it to the demand line, bring it downwards, you're going to get Q2. And let's have this. What do we have here? In this case, what do you see? There's a large change in price, but there's a small change in quantity demanded. That means that the commodity is slightly sensitive to change in price. And the demand curve here is more steep. It's steep. Here, in the case of elastic, it was more flatter, but here it looks quite steeper. And the elasticity of demand is less than 1. And the elasticity of demand is less than 1. So when a commodity have inelastic demand or fairly inelastic demand, its elasticity is less than 1. So you have seen that for inelastic demand, you have seen that for inelastic demand. Let's go to unitary elastic demand. What is unitary elastic demand? Let's see. Unitary elastic demand is when, let's say, is that the percentage change in quantity demanded is always equal to the percentage change in price. Hence, when the price increases by 30%, quantity demand also will fall by 30%. So when we unit elastic demand, the change in price is equal to the change in demand. If price falls by 10%, demand will increase by 10%. If price increase by 20%, demand will reduce by 20%. So the change are almost the same. So you have elasticity equal to 1. In rare cases, only few commodity behaves that way, right? So if you look at the diagram here we have quantity demand, D here, this have 1 here, this have 1 here. So they change in price and the change in quantity demanded is the same. And elasticity is equal to 1. In most, but let me say that most of the goods, hardly do you see any commodity that behave that way. Even though we say it's theoretically correct, but in practice, hardly do you see a commodity behaving that way, where price have increased by 20%, demand falls by 20%. It's something that's very difficult to see. But for theory, it's possible, but it's difficult to see. Let's go on. Another one we want to see is what we call perfectly inelastic demand. Here we said it's inelastic. Don't confuse. At here, we said inelastic demand or fairly inelastic demand. At IV, we say that perfectly inelastic demand. What is perfectly inelastic demand? This is a situation where changes in price do not affect the quantity demand. With fairly inelastic demand, when price changes, let's look at the price. The price, let's get this diagram. Let me sketch something for you to see. Let's see this. The price was here. The demand, the quantity demanded was still constant. If it's 6, it's still 6. The price increased from, let's say the price was 2, it increased to 8. Still demand is still fixed, is 6. The price reduced to 1, still demand is fixed. So whether price increases or decreases, people demand for that product is the same. It remains fixed. Okay? People say, how? Is it possible in real world? Can you go to the market and see any product that behaves that way? Let me say that it's in the real world, it's very difficult to see product that behave that way. But the exceptional product that behave that way, it's not common to see that thing happening in the market or any place. But sometimes it does happen. Let's look at some few examples I can use to explain to you. One example, let's look at what they call the pints of blood. When you, for instance, you go to the hospital, the doctor tells you that you need maybe 5 pints of blood. Right? You need 5. When you go, the price have increased. You can't say you buy less than 4. You need 5. You have to buy 5, otherwise you die. If you go and the price have reduced, you can't say you want to buy more and put it in the fridge. When you need it, go and take it. You cannot do that. So whether the price goes up or goes down, you have to buy the same pints of blood. Because that's the quantity you need that moment to survive. You cannot buy more and store it. You cannot store blood. And you cannot buy more than that. You will die if the price falls. So a commodity like this behave that way. Also, we have what we call the quantity of salt you put in your food. If you are preparing maybe palm nut soup, the quantity of salt you have to put in is the same quantity. You can't say that when the price has gone up, so you reduce the quantity, the food will not taste nice. You can't say that when the price have gone down, so you want to put a full bucket of salt in the thing. It will not make nice. So the quantity of salt you put into your food at a particular time remains the same no matter the changes in price. If the price reduces, or the quantity you put in will be the same quantity, because you cannot make it more salty or less salty. So this is a typical example. Again, another example is the quantity of fuel you use for a journey. Maybe I'm traveling from here to Accra with my private car. I have to use maybe 10 gallons of fuel. Without 10 gallons, I cannot get to my destination. If the price reduces or increases, if I need 10 gallons of fuel to make it to Kumasi in Ashanti region, I have to buy the same quantity, whether the price reduces or falls, because if I buy less, I cannot travel. if I buy more, where am I going to keep it, right? So you buy the same quantity so that you can travel to wherever you want to go to. If you don't have a place to store it, if you buy more, if the price have reduced, you buy more, maybe you might not have a place to store it. If you buy less, you cannot get to your destination. So you buy the same quantity you need at that moment. So in that case, the goods behave perfectly inelastic. But let me first be very real that it's quite palpable to know that only few commodities behave that way. It's only few commodities. You cannot think about more commodities that behave that way. The price changes, yes, the demand remains the same. It's very few. They are very exceptional commodities you can think of. And yet the elasticity is equal to 0. Elasticity is equal to 0 because quantity remains constant. The quantity you're buying at one moment remains constant. So the elasticity is equal to 0. Later, when we start solving these things, when we get the answer, we can try to operationalize them. Is it elastic or inelastic? So don't be oblivious about the sign. This is greater than 1. This is less than 1. This is equal to 1. This is equal to 0. Let's look at the fifth type of elasticity. Then we go on with our lecture. Let's look at the fifth one. The fifth one talks about perfectly elastic demand. And here we have what? Elastic demand or fairly elastic demand. We have perfectly elastic demand. Don't confuse the two. What is perfectly elastic demand? It is a situation where the level of price remains the same. Remains the same no matter the change in quantity demand by consumers. So what does it mean? Here, demand, the price is the same. Whether demand increases to 4, if demand is 4, if the price is 8, the price is still 8. If demand increases to 10, the price is still 8. If demand goes to 6, the price is still 8. So the price remains the same regardless of the change in quantity demand. So whether quantity demand increase or decrease, producers produce the good at the same price. That's something also very difficult to fathom. How does this thing work in the real world? There are few commodities that behave that way too. What are some of them? In Ghana, for instance, the price of sachet water, for instance, in Ghana, I don't know, back here in Ghana, we have water, they put it in sachet water we drink. The price, we have one is being sold for 20 pesos, and the price has been the same for the past 6-7 years. Right? People are demanding more. Every day there are people drink water. Yes, still, the price have remained the same, almost about 6 to 7 years. You're buying the same at the same price. We expect that as the demand have gone up, the price will go up. But yes, people are buying the same. The price is still the same. The price of in Ghana also we have what we call yogurt and farm milk. I don't know what we have in Senegal or Ivory Coast or wherever, or Caribbean, who are listening to us. The price of yogurt, they are just ice creams we use in Ghana. The price has remained almost the same. 1 cedi to 2 cedi, the price has almost remained the same for so many years. It remained the same for almost about 8 to 7 years. That recently they changed it. So there are few commodities that behave that way, right? But it's very difficult. It's only few commodities that behave that way. And the elasticity here is equal to infinity. Let me reiterate that. I told you about 5 types of elasticity: elastic demand, inelastic demand, unity elastic demand, perfectly elastic demand, perfectly elastic demand. Among all these 5, perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, unity elastic are extreme forms. Only few commodities behave that way. Most of the commodities we buy on the mall, on the markets, in our homes, in our schools, in our jobs, most of the commodity can be categorized into elastic or what? Inelastic. So majority of them, about 95% of the things we buy is either the commodity either is elastic or inelastic. The other 3 are extreme forms. It hardly occurs by having in only exceptional cases. Once again, I want to tell you that all these things we're having here, we have them on the pen drive. This is lecture 12 for you. We have we're going to have 15 set of lectures for you. You have all on a pen drive for you. Get it. If you get it, you can even stay in the house and learn and go and pass economics. We are giving everything to you here. Again, you have the book. In the book, we have all these notes, the data response. We have a place where you can also solve questions and mark yourself. We have over 200 objectives for you too. We have CD. So that comes with the book. So these are things for you, and I hope you follow all these lectures very continuously. We have come to one very important aspect of this topic, and one of the most popular questions they ask in the WASI. I told you that most of the goods you and I we buy on the market, most of them are either elastic or inelastic. And I said that when the commodity is elastic, it means that it is very sensitive to change in price. The slight change in price bring about a large change in the quantity demanded. And when the commodity is inelastic, it's not too much sensitive to change in price. So even if price even increases, people keep on buying the product. Only few people stop buying. So most of the things we buy, whether in America or Canada, in South Korea or Japan or China or India or Ghana, wherever, in Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, most of the things we buy, majority of them, is either the commodity has elastic demand or inelastic demand. So you want to find out what are some of the factors that actually precipitate, or what are some of the factors that make some of these goods elastic or inelastic? Is it of just a miracle that some goods behave elastic, some goods behave inelastic? So let's try to fathom what actually causes these things. Number one of the reasons that cause a good being elastic or inelastic is whether the commodity is a necessity or is a luxury. What is a necessity? Necessity is a commodity you cannot live without, like food, like shelter, like clothing, like accommodation and those things. They are necessities. So if the price even increases, you cannot say that you are not going to wear clothing again. If all price of clothing have gone up, you say now you want to walk naked in the 17th century. Or what would you do? You keep on buying. Maybe you reduce your quantity by a small margin, but you keep on buying. You can't say that there's water is expensive, so you don't drink water again. And what are you going to do? Right? Such things are a necessity. A necessity tends to have inelastic demand. Even if the price increases, only few people stop buying. The rest, we keep on. Only people, majority of them will keep on buying. You just complain for 2 days, 3 days, you go back and buy because you cannot live without them. So commodities that are necessities tends to have inelastic demand. So those who sell such a product, they take advantage of this and increase the price astronomically. Because if there's a drug, you need that drug to survive every day. What will you do? Will you say that you not take the drug because it's expensive? If you have to go and sell your property to come and buy the drug, you will do that. So your demand in that instance is inelastic. Regardless of the increase in price, you are still demanding it. Because you cannot do it. When a commodity is a luxury, when the commodities are luxury, there are goods you cannot do. You can do without them. If you have it, fine. If you don't have it, it's okay. Somebody said I have a diamond ring. Somebody went to buy a diamond ring, maybe $100,000. It's nice. Maybe you want to show to everybody that you have arrived. Fine, that's cool. You want to be somebody who is a illustrious person. Fine. But if you don't have it, you will not die. I've not seen diamond before. I don't have diamond, but I'm still alive. So such goods are cosmetic expenditures. Maybe you want to show off class, that you're part of the bourgeoisie's class. Fine. But in real sense, if the price increases, if the commodity is a luxury to you, what will you do? You try to shift away from it because you can do that without it. If the price are good, the price is too high, my demand will be very sensitive. I will decide not to buy it because without it, my life goes on. So commodity that tends to be a luxury to you, and sometimes commodity that tends to be luxury tends to have elastic demand. Commodity that tends to be necessity tends to have inelastic demand. But let me say this patently, perspicuously, let me say that whether a commodity is elastic or inelastic, it depends on you. Somebody says that, oh, private cars are luxuries. No, it depends on what you're doing. If you're a very busy person, you need a private car, right? If you are not very busy, a private car will be a luxury to you. But somebody who is busy, have a lot of brands, needs a private car. See that? So when a commodity is a necessity, it tends to be elastic. When a commodity is a luxury, it tends to be inelastic. When a commodity is a necessity, it tends to be inelastic. People cannot do without it. When a commodity is a luxury, it tends to be elastic because people will prepare to shift from that commodity and go and buy the commodity they want because it's a luxury to them. So necessities are inelastic, where goods that are luxurious has elastic demand. Number two, the availability of close substitutes. The commodity you are buying, does it have close substitutes on the market? If I'm going to buy cement, and when I went to the market, there's only cement, the Gassem cement. As some years back, Ghanaians used to have Gassem cement. If you want to build your house with cement, you have to buy from Gassem. What do? If you go there, the price have gone up, you are still demand it. Maybe if you're going to buy $100, you cut it and buy $90, right? But you still demand it, right? Because you don't have any place to get cement to buy again. They didn't allow for any importation. They didn't allow for any manufacturing. So if your commodity doesn't have any substitute, you are marginalized. You're being forced to buy the product, and therefore, in that case, your demand becomes inelastic. The price have gone up. You can reduce your demand by a small margin, but you need the commodity at all costs. It doesn't have any close substitute. You need to build your house. In Ghana, we don't build house with wood. We build house with cement. I don't know, in some countries they build house with wood and all those. In Ghana, we don't do that. If the commodity has substitutes, if I'm going to buy Pepsodent, there's Colgate. If I go and the Pepsodent, the toothpaste, it's a toothpaste in Ghana. If the price is too expensive, what will I do? I'll move away from that and go and buy a substitute. So any commodity that has substitutes tends to be elastic because you can easily switch. If I go and the price have gone up for maybe Pepsodent, I'll have a higher response. I'll respond very high to the increase in price by moving away from the purchase of Pepsodent to go and buy close-up. Or you can say cars. I want to buy a Toyota car. When the Toyota car is very expensive, I have Nissan or Kia, whatever. So once they have substitute, demand tends to be elastic. So if you're selling a product, you have to be very mindful about this, that if my product is a substitute, how should I behave? If it doesn't have any substitute, how should I behave? So people who actually operate in the market take all these factors into cognizance. When it comes to fixing their prices, they're able to phantom that their product they are selling has elastic demand or inelastic demand. In so doing, they have to think about how they have to price it. So that's what I told you, that the idea of this elasticity is not only for you to write the exams and go away, also for everyday knowledge. Those who are into business, who want to enter into business, another aspect, and government tax experts, it's very important for them. Although we look at the amount of income spent, how much of your income do you spend on the commodity? Maybe you take 5,000 Ghana cedis. Let's assume that somebody who earns 5,000 Ghana cedis, he's going to buy a pen. When the pen was 1 cedi, and the pen is 1 cedi, 50 pesos. You see that the price have increased from 1 cedi to 1 cedi 50 pesos. But you see that the person earns so much of money, the salary is too large that these 50 pesos constitute a small chunk of his income. What is 50 pesos to somebody who earns 5,000? It's negligible. So he will not even notify that the price have gone up. So goods, any commodity that takes a small chunk of your income, your demand becomes inelastic. If you go and if the price have gone up in the mall, you don't even take notice because that money is very negligible. It doesn't affect your salary so much. So you're okay. So goods that take a small expenditure of your income, goods that take small amount of your income tends to be inelastic. You sometimes lose sight that even the price have gone up because it doesn't bother to you. But commodity that take a higher chunk of your income. If I earn 5,000, I'm going to buy a product. The product is 3,000. When the price have moved from 3,000 to 4,000, I'll be very mindful about the increase in price. Why? If I buy the product, it have taken almost all my salary. So commodity that takes a higher chunk of your income, in most cases, commodity tends to be inelastic. Right? Commodity tends to be elastic, Commodity that takes a higher chunk of your income, the commodity you become very sensitive to changes in price. The consumer become very sensitive to changes in price. And therefore commodities that take a higher chunk of income tends to be elastic. Commodity that takes small chunk of your income tends to be inelastic. And commodity that takes a higher chunk of your income tends to be elastic. So you're beginning to understand why some goods are elastic and some goods are inelastic. The commodity that takes a small chunk of your income tends to be inelastic. The commodity that takes a higher chunk of income tends to be elastic. We have what we call the time period. The time period you buy the product is also very important. What is the time period? You're considering this short time period. A short time period. We have a long time period. So let's take these two time periods. Short time period and long time period. Probably you're buying a product, right? I'm buying the product maybe here in Ghana where Cantonment, right? Cantonment is a suburb in Ghana. The price have gone up in Cantonment. In a short run, in a short period, maybe the first 2 or 3 days or 4 days, I've not discovered any place I can get the same product to buy. So what do I do? I will keep on buying. My demand becomes inelastic. The price have gone up. But I've not discovered any other place in Accra where I can get the same product to buy at a lower price, right? So what happens? What happens is that in the short run, within 1 or 2 weeks, I'll keep on buying the product because I don't have any option. In that case, your demand becomes inelastic in a short period. In a long period, let's say maybe 1 year time or 6 months time, you get a friend calls you, you told me that you're buying a product at Cantonment. I've seen one of the products at Spinters. It's very cheap. So stop buying from Cantonment and come and buy from my area. It's the same quality. In the long run, you will shift your demand from that product because you are able to discover that you can get the same product to produce at a lower price, right? In that case, your demand becomes elastic. In the long run, people's demand for product becomes elastic. In the short run, people's demand becomes inelastic because they are marginalized. They have a short period. They are not able to discover that at other places they can get the same product to buy a very cheap price. Back here in Ghana, what they do is that if you want to buy foodstuffs in Accra, it's very expensive. Those who have cars, they drive to the villages and hinterlands. They get them very cheap. So in the long run, they have discovered that I will not buy foodstuffs in Accra. I will drive to the outskirts of Accra, go to villages and towns and buy the product and bring it to Accra and come and have it for my family. That's one thing they can think of. So we have that issue of, in the short run, demand tends to be inelastic, and the reason is because you have not able to discover any other place can get the same thing to buy, so you are marginalized. You keep on buying. In the long run, if you're able to discover other place, what do? You cut down your demand and you go and switch to the product you want. So these are the dynamics. Another factor that affects influence whether your demand is elastic or inelastic is what they call habit formation or your degree of addiction to a product. When a consumer develops addiction for a product, for instance, there are people who have decided that I like BM cars. Whether Toyota or Nissan is very cheap, I don't care. I always buy BM cars. If such a person has developed addiction, doesn't care about whether the price of BM or Mercedes have gone up, the person will still demand Toyota, still demand the BM cars. So such a person, we say the person's demand is inelastic. So when people develop addiction for a product, they don't care about how cheap the other product are. That's the product they like. Maybe they have used it for a long period. People who use a product for a long period of time, those people like product and they don't care whether the price have gone up, they still demand it. Somebody say, somebody say he like iPhone. He doesn't care. itel and other phones, techno phones are relatively cheaper, but that's the iPhones he like. He doesn't care going to spend 4,000 or 5,000 to buy iPhone, while other phones are cheap, right? So because he have used that phone for so many years and he like how the phone performs. So the person have developed an addiction, and therefore his demand will always be inelastic for that product, unless you change his addiction. Some people are even addicted to hard drugs and alcohol. It doesn't care the increase in the price of this alcohol or hard drug. They will still keep on demanding that product. In that sense, their demand is inelastic. But if you don't have any addiction for a product, me for instance, I don't have any addiction for cars, any addiction for phone. Any phone, once the phone is good, it's average, me, I like it. If I'm going to buy maybe itel phone, when the itel phone is very expensive, I'll just go and stop buying, go and buy what is relatively cheaper if it can give me the same function. But I don't have any addiction for a product. So if you don't have any addiction for a product, your demand tends to be elastic. The slightest increase in the price of the product, you want to shift your demand because you don't have addiction for that product. Those who have addiction, when the price is even increased, they reduce their demand by a small margin. They keep on buying, but that's what they like. They don't care about whether other prices are even cheap, whether they have substitute. Some people behave that way. In that case, so what they want to say that when people develop addiction for a product, that's the habit formation, their demand for that product tends to be inelastic. But people that doesn't have any addiction for a product, their demand tends to be elastic. Whenever the price goes up, they will shift from that product and go and buy any product they think their money can afford because they don't have any addiction. The number of uses of the commodity. Some commodities can be used for several purposes. Somebody can have a metal. The metal can be, it can have maybe copper or lead or tin. It can be used for a lot of things. If I have copper, or maybe I have tin or bronze, I can use it for a lot of things. If a commodity can be used for a lot of things, their demand tends to be inelastic. If the price even goes up, the person is not so bothered, because once he gets access to that product, the product can be used for a lot of things. So commodity that is a composite demand, the commodity that can be used for a lot of things, tends to be inelastic. The consumer is not so much worried about the price. All that he cares about is you have to get a product. And once you get a product, you can use the product to do a lot of things. So that answers why products that have a lot of use, that have composite demand, tends to have inelastic demand. Commodities that don't have multiple uses. For instance, what if you buy food? What do? The only thing is that you eat the food. You can't use the food for any other thing. If you buy credit on your phone, what do? They put the phone talk, the talk time, the credit in Ghana, we call it credit. You just put it on your phone, that's all. You can't use it for any other thing. So if the commodity doesn't have multiple uses, right, then in most cases, consumers' demand for that product tends to be elastic. Anytime there is a change in price or increase in price, they will shift. A lot of people will stop buying because the commodity doesn't have a lot of multiple uses. They don't have that sort of multitudinous use for that product. So commodity that have a lot of uses tends to have elastic demand. Commodity that have a lot of uses that can be used for a lot of commodity can be used for a lot of uses, can be used for a lot of items, tends to have inelastic demand. But the commodity that have a limited uses in it when it comes to its consumption tends to have elastic demand. Then the last one we want to talk about is the standard of living in a country. The standard of living, what does standard of living measures? It measures the welfare of the people. So whenever people secure more jobs, people are paid very well, they have an improved standard of living. So whenever there is a standard of living increases, right, people welfare improves. People have more money to buy a product and they are not so worried about the increase in price. There are enough jobs, they are paid weekly, they have money to spend. They want to go to a nightclub, they want to go to the picnic, they want to spend. So they are not bothered so much about the increase in price. All that they care about, they have money to spend. In that case, if the country is experiencing this higher standard of living, most of the things people buy will tend to behave inelastic. But if the standard of living is low, in Ghana, in South Sudan, in Central African Republic, in Gabon, the standard of living probably in Ghana, in Nigeria too, whenever price increase, because standard of living is very low, people doesn't have the money even to carry on, they will tend to behave, the goods they tend to behave elastic. So what is it that when the commodity the standard of living of the country is very high, the commodity tends to have elastic demand, it tends to have inelastic demand. When a country have a higher standard of living, the commodity tends to have inelastic demand. If the commodity doesn't have any higher standard of living, the commodity tends to have elastic demand. So when a country is experiencing a higher standard of living, commodities behave in elastic demand. When countries are experiencing low standard of living, commodities behave elastic demand. So these are some of the factors that make some of these goods. Maybe you can also think about the durability. The durability of the commodity too can make it elastic or inelastic. The durability. A product that's durable, a product that can last long. You can buy a product that means that, oh, if I buy Toyota cars, it lasts long. If I buy their engine, it lasts long. In that case, if the price even goes up, you buy it. But because you know that you are rest assured that when I buy that product, it will last long for me. If I buy maybe Binaton iron, I bought a Binaton iron, it lasted for about 6 years. If I buy, even if it's expensive, I buy it, I know it's going to last long for me. In that case, your demand becomes inelastic. But commodity does not last long. You have commodities you buy it 1 or 2 days, it doesn't function again. In that case, that commodity, your demand will be elastic. So these are some of the factors that make some of the goods we buy, you and I, we buy on the market, on the mall, it make them behave elastic or inelastic. So wrap your mind around it. The things you buy every day. Now, every day when you go to the market, you buy things, check. The things I buy, are they elastic or inelastic? My demand for it, is it elastic or inelastic? What are factors that are actually precipitating that role? What are some of the factors that is making my demand for the product elastic or inelastic? So start doing that. So this is not only for the classroom, it's for your everyday life. How you try to effectuate these concepts and intuition for your life. So you're going to find out, you're going to learn how to calculate price elasticity of demand. In most WASI questions, you are supposed to calculate the price elasticity of demand, right? And we have two approaches in calculating price elasticity of demand. You're going to first, we have the point elasticity of demand, and we have the arc elasticity of demand. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to first take the point elasticity of demand and understand it. After that, we move to the arc elasticity of demand, and you understand how it's being used, right? So in most of these things, you're going to calculate in exams. So you have to be very abreast of the calculation. Let's see how the point elasticity of demand, how it works out. The point elasticity of demand, the point approach. So this is like the point elasticity of demand, or the point elasticity approach of calculating the price elasticity of demand. With the point elasticity of demand calculation, the percentage change in quantity demanded is divided by the percentage change in price without the use of midpoints on the demand curve. So let's look at this diagram. I hope you can see from here. If price is here, here is quantity demanded. Price was 20, demand was 50, right? When price reduced to 10, demand shoots to 70. So first, price has reduced, demand has what? Increased. With point elasticity, you're looking at how there was a change in price from here to here and change in demand from here to here. So you're interested in these points, this one and this one, this one and this one. You're not going to find the midpoint. But midpoint is that the midpoint approach is the arc elasticity, where you look at 20 and 30 and you find the average. So 20 and 30 put together give you 30. Divided by 2, you get 15. You are trying to find the midpoint. What is the average of the change, right? What is the average between the two numbers? From 20 to 30. And you find the average. From 50 to 70, you find the average, right? But with point elasticity, we don't do that. We just look at the values and find the differences. And that's the reason. So with point elasticity, for instance, I look at this price and that price, this one, and I find the differences. And I use that for the estimation. I don't look at the two price and find the average. The two quantities and find the average. No. We don't do that. And so, let's see, with price elasticity of demand, we're going to have percentage change in quantity demand divided by percentage change in price times 100. What happens? The percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to the percentage change in price times 100. That's one of the formulas. Or you can say that this is the symbol for price elasticity of demand. Or you can say that the price elasticity of demand here. So this is the first approach for the point elasticity. The percentage change in quantity demand divided by percentage change in price times 100. Later, you're going to take data response question and receive. Or you're going to say that the change in quantity demand, the price elasticity of demand, which is E subscript D, is equal to the change in quantity over change in price times the initial price times initial quantity. What is the change in quantity demand? The change in quantity demand is the new price minus initial is the change in quantity demand is the new quantity minus the initial quantity. So QN is the new quantity and QI is the initial quantity. What is the change in price? The change in price is the new price, the PN, they are subscripts. PN, PI, don't write it PN. No. They are subscript. They are just a small letter showing subscript. PN minus PI. What is PN? PN is the new price. What is PI? Is the initial price, right? So if you subtract the initial price from initial price from the new price, you're going to get a change in price. If you subtract the initial quantity from the new quantity, you're getting the change in quantity. So if I get a change in quantity, but change in quantity times the initial price times the initial quantity demanded, you're going to get your point elasticity of demand, right? And in most times in WASI, they ask you to use the point elasticity. The arc elasticity is hardly used in exams. most of the time, the demand that you use the point, they tell you to calculate price elasticity of demand. And most of the time, they ask you to, when they say calculate the price elasticity of demand, if they didn't specify that use the arc elasticity, you have to use the point elasticity. If they tell you, let me restrict myself again. If they say that calculate the price elasticity of demand, if they are giving you a question, if the question didn't specify that you should use the arc elasticity for estimation, then use this approach. Unless it specifies and tell you that use the arc elasticity. Later, you're going to solve a question with the arc elasticity and you see how it works out. There's a question here we want to solve to explain this price elasticity of demand estimation using the point elasticity. Let's take that question so that we understand things better. So let's say you have an example here we want to use to explain what we just spoke about. The price of Uncle Sam rice increased from 20 cedis to 30 cedis. 8 quantity demanded fell from 45 bucks to 30 bucks. Calculate the price elasticity of the Uncle Sam rice. So let's say we have in Ghana, there's a rice we all like so much, American rice, we call it Uncle Sam. We are assuming that the price was 20, it increased to 30. And when it increased, what happened? The demand fell from 45 bucks to 30 bucks. Calculate the price elasticity of the Uncle Sam rice. Here we're going to use the point elasticity because the question didn't specify that use arc elasticity. Later I'm going to teach you how we use the arc elasticity. But here if the question didn't specify, just use the point elasticity. Right? So let's say later you take a question, that's what's the question and we solve it. This is just something to explain to you so that you understand the formulas I gave you. I gave you two formulas. Let's go at the formula 1. In formula 1, the elasticity of demand is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Right? So let's see. First, what is the new price? The new price is 30. What is the initial price? The initial price is 20. What is the change in price? Change in price is equal to the new price by initial price. What is the new price? The new price is what? 30. What is the initial price? The initial price is 20. What's the difference? The difference is 10. So, if you want to find the percentage change, if you want to find the percentage change in price, it's going to be the change. What the change now is what? The percent change. Let me see the percentage in price is equal to the change. The change is 10 divided by the initial price. The initial price is what? 20. 20 times 100. 20 times what? 100. So this cancel this. This cancel this. What do you get? You get 50%, right? So the formula is the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. You have seen the percentage change in price. We find out the new price was 30, the initial price was 20, and therefore the change in price is the 30 minus 20. That gives you 10. So if you want to find the percentage change, here you're interested in the percentage change, then the change, that's the 10, divided by the initial price, that's 20 times 100. And when you cancel it, you're going to get 50%. Let's find out the percentage change in quantity demanded. So the percentage change in quantity demanded, what's the new demand? The new demand is what? 30. The initial demand is what? 45. What's the change in quantity? The change is the new minus initial. What's the new one? 30. What's the initial one? 45. What do you get? Negative 15. So the new quantity is 30. The initial quantity is 45. So what's the change in quantity? Change in quantity is the new quantity minus the initial quantity. That's 30 minus 45. That's the change. What is the percentage change? The percentage change in quantity. That's going to be negative 15 divided by the initial quantity is 45 times 100. Right? So 15 goes to 15 once. 15 goes here 3 times. We're going to have negative 100 times 3. What are we going to get? We're going to get something like negative 33.333. Okay, so what's the elasticity? Let's find the elasticity. The elasticity here, as I told you, is the percentage change in quantity demand. What's the percentage change in quantity demand? It's equal to negative 33.3. And what's the percentage change in price? The percentage change, so this one is percent. This percent. What's the percentage change in price? The percentage change in price is what? 50%. Right? So let's cancel the percentage. What left is that we have negative 33 over 50. So you can use a calculator to punch and let's see what you get. So if you divide it, you're going to get 0.666. Right? And let me say that anytime you do price elasticity of demand, you're going to get a negative figure. Why? Because the relation between price and quantity demanded is negative. If price goes up, demand will fall. If price goes down, demand will rise. And therefore, the elasticity of demand is always what? Negative. Right? So anytime you calculate price elasticity of demand, your answer should be negative. So if you want to interpret, what you have to do is that you have to take the absolute. If you want to take the absolute, it means that make the figure positive. If it's negative, make it what? Positive, right? So let's take the absolute. If you take, so that the reason why you have to take the absolute before you can interpret, because always your answer is in negative. Otherwise, you say all goods are inelastic, but they are all less than 1. Or your answers will be inelastic, but they are all less than 1. Because always the answer will be in negative. Because of the negative relation between price and quantity demanded. Right? If price goes up, demand falls. And when price falls, demand rises. So there's that negative relation. So always, you have a negative answer. So for you to interpret, what you do is to take the absolute. You take the positive figure and interpret. Whether is it greater than 1 or less than 1. If you don't do that, always all your answers will be less than 1 because of the negative sign. So let's take away the negative. Let's take the absolute. Absolute, this is a symbol, gives you 0.66. So the absolute value will give you what? 0.66. Make it positive. Is it less than 1 or greater than 1? It's less than 1. And when it's less than 1, it means the demand. What does it mean? Interpretation. Let's see. What does it mean? Let's see the interpretation. It means the demand for Uncle Sam rice is inelastic, meaning this means that it is slightly responsive to changes in price. So I told you that when the elasticity is less than 1, it means that the commodity is inelastic. So it means the demand for Uncle Sam rice is inelastic. What does it mean? That it is slightly, the demand for Uncle Sam rice is slightly responsive to change in price. So even if the price increases, Ghanaians will still be buying. Only few people stop buying, but they like the rice. That's what it means. If the price even increases, it means that the demand, okay, the demand is slightly responsive to change in price. So if the price even increase from maybe 100 Ghana cedis to 200 Ghana cedis, only few people stop buying, a lot of people keep on buying, meaning that the demand for Uncle Sam rice in Ghana is inelastic. People like Uncle Sam rice. They are not worried about the increase in price. That's the first formula. So anytime you do elasticity here, you have to interpret. Don't leave it like that. Otherwise they will mark you wrong. Interpret first, take the absolute, make it positive. Find out is it less than 1 or greater than 1. If it's less than 1, it's inelastic. If it's greater than 1, it's elastic. Then you interpret. What does it mean? Let's use the formula 2. We are still on this question. We first use the first formula to solve it. Now let's use the second formula to solve it. Let's look at the formula 2. Still on the point elasticity. The formula 2, this is how it works. Price elasticity of demand is going to change in quantity. We're changing price times initial price times initial quantity. Right? And I tell you that the change in quantity is equal to the new quantity minus the initial quantity. The change in price is equal to the new price minus the initial price. What's the change in quantity? What is the new quantity? The new quantity is 30. The initial quantity is what? 45. What's the change? The change is 30 minus 45. That gives you a negative 15. What about the new price? The new price is what? 30. From the same question, we are using the same question. The initial price was what? 20. What's the change in price? It is the initial, the new minus the initial, that gives you 10. So we have that. So when you finish, you have to fix them back into the formula. The formula says that the change in quantity, what is the change in quantity? Negative 15. What is the change in price? The change in price is 10. What's the initial price? The initial price is 20, is here. And what is the initial quantity? The initial quantity is here, is what? 45. So you have this. Negative 15 minus 10. So the change in quantity is the negative 15. The change in price is 10. The initial price is 20. The initial quantity is 45. So let's see. Let's see what will be our final answer. 0 will cancel 0. 15 goes into 15 once. 15 goes here 3 times. So what do we have? We have negative 2 divided by 3. And when you divide negative 2 by 3, you're going to get negative 0.666. It continues. So the elasticity is equal to negative 0.666, whatever, 0.6. It's okay. So whether you use this approach, this formula 2, for the point elasticity, whether you use this approach for the point elasticity or use this approach for the point elasticity, you end up getting the same answer. Right? Whether you use this approach for the point elasticity or use this approach, formula 1, formula 2, the answer is still the same. So you can use which one you're very convenient. And I told you that the same way, in order to interpret, you have to find the absolute so that you make it positive, because always the price elasticity of demand will give you a negative figure because of the negative relation between price and quantity demand. So let's find the absolute. The absolute, this is the symbol. When you bring this symbol, it means absolute, the bracket. So here too, the same thing. When you bring that symbol, it means absolute. You're making the figure positive. Any figure that is negative, make it positive. When you do that, you're going to get 0.666 6. Is it less than 1 or greater than 1? It's less than 1, meaning that it's what? Inelastic. So the same interpretation as we did here. So what are we able to understand? We understand that with the point elasticity, whether you use the first formula, the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price, or use this formula, price elasticity is equal to change in quantity demand over change in price times the initial price times the initial quantity demand. What each or any formula you use, you end up getting the same answer. And let me also restrict that anytime you calculate price elasticity demand, you're supposed to get a negative answer. If you don't get it, it's wrong. It doesn't follow intuition, because we are able to understand that the law of demand makes us understand that the price and quantity demanded is negatively related. When price goes up, demand falls. And you see from the example, when price increases from 2030, demand decreases. And when price decreases to demand falls, demand increases. Because of that reason, always your answer will be negative. So when you get a negative, you take the absolute. So you make the answer positive. Then you interpret. If it's less than 1, it's inelastic, meaning that the commodity is slightly responding to changes in price. If it's greater than 1, it means elastic. But the commodity is very sensitive to changes in price. So that's the one. We're also going to take the arc elasticity of demand and see how it also, we work it out with the last arc elasticity of demand. How does it work out? So I told you that when it comes to elasticity, we have the point elasticity approach for estimation, and we have the arc. With the arc elasticity, what do you see? This approach calculates the elasticity of demand for a commodity using the midpoint values of both price and quantity demand. So for instance, if I have this place, let's look at this. Let's look at the midpoint we are talking about. Let's assume we have a product, the price was 20, the demand was 12. The price reduced to 10, the demand goes to 29. So what is this is the old price, this is the new price, this is the old quantity, this is the new quantity. So if you are finding the midpoint, you add this one, 20 plus 10, it gives you 30, you divide it by 2, you get 15. So here you use the average to do the estimation. So you see that here is going to be a change in quantity over change in price. What's the change in quantity here? The change in quantity, as you know already, is going to be the new quantity my initial quantity. The change in price is going to the new price my initial price. So the change in quantity, we have the new quantity minus the initial quantity. The change in price, you have the new price minus initial price. So when you come here, you're going to use the midpoint. What's the midpoint? Instead of using 30 plus 20, we'll give you 20 plus 10, 20 plus 10 will give you 30 divided by 2. So that instead of, you don't use only one of the product, you use the midpoint value. When it comes to demand 2, we have 12 and 29. So you add 12 and 29 and divide it by 2 so that you use the average. The reason why they use the midpoint is that with the point elasticity, if you change, for instance, if with point elasticity, for instance, if I say that the price was 20, the demand was 12, it decreased to 10, then demand is 29, right? If I use that to calculate the point elasticity, you get a different answer. But when I turn it up and say that the price was 10 and increased to 20, and the demand also have reduced from 29 to 12, when you use that to estimate it, you get a different answer. So people didn't like the idea of the point elasticity. If you change the figures and you bring one become new, one becomes old, and then another instance you change one becomes new, one becomes old, and you use to estimate it, you get different answers. So they saw that the midpoint will solve that problem, because it will give you one value for the two prices, so that you don't get a midpoint, so that you don't get different values when you change the figures. In the same way here, to give you one value for the quantity 1, quantity 2, so so that you don't get different values. That was the idea. By most exams, the point elasticity is what they use. Arc elasticity is hardly used unless the question specifies. So here, what do you see? So let's come here. Let's use this example, the same example we use. We are not going to use the point elasticity to see how the example is going to be. What we know already that, let me also go over example 1. The price of Uncle Sam rice increased from 20 cedis to 30 cedis. The quantity demand fell from 45 bucks to 30 bucks. Calculate the price elasticity of Uncle Sam rice using the arc elasticity approach. So here we know that the new price is 30. The initial price is 20. What's the change in price? The new price minus initial price, which is equal to 30 times 20. That gives you 10. What about the new quantity? The new quantity is what? 30. The initial quantity is what? 45. Therefore, the change in quantity is the new quantity minus initial quantity, which is what? 30 minus 45, which gives you negative 15. So let's use that for let's put that into the formula. The formula says the change over this gives you the new quantity, which is what? Negative 15 plus initial price, which is what? The change in price. The change in quantity is negative 15. What's the change in price? The change in quantity is negative 15. The change in price over there is 10. When you come here, instead of using the initial price, like what we're doing in the point elasticity, you're going to use both the price, the new price, and the initial price, and you find the average, right? The two, instead of using the initials. N plus 1 divided by 2, that is 30 plus 20 divided by 2 gives you what? 50 divided by 2 gives you what? 25. What about that for demand? Q2 plus Q1 divided by 2, what do you get? That gives you that's 30 plus 45 divided by 2. That's 75 divided by 2. And then you're going to get something like 37.5, right? So when you come here, this place will give you 37.5. I think my guess is true. So it means that now the elasticity can be rewritten here as negative 15 over 10 times 25 divided by 37.5, right? You can punch the top, multiply the top, multiply the down, and give it the. So when you multiply the top, you're going to get something like negative 37, negative 375, and the top one gives you negative 375, the down one gives you positive 375. So when you divide, you're going to get elasticity which is equal to -1. So you see that the arc elasticity you are getting elasticity negative. So anytime it should be negative. So when you take the absolute, what do you get? When you take the absolute, you're going to get elasticity is going to be 1, which is when elasticity is equal to 1, we call it unitary elastic. So you see that when we use the arc elasticity, the answer we are getting here is different from when we use the point elasticity. Here we got the answer 1, the point elasticity we got 0.66. Why? Because here we use the midpoint, we use the average of the two prices. Here we use the average of the two quantities. That's why we're getting different answer. That's why I'm telling you that if in WASI the question doesn't specify, just use the point elasticity. That's the most ideal. Okay, so you have able to estimate the same question using the point elasticity and also using the arc elasticity, where the midpoint comes in. I think before we move from the price elasticity to the income elasticity, we want to look at what is the relevance of knowing the elasticity of a commodity. And I told you that most of the commodities we buy on the market are either elastic or inelastic. Why is it relevant for you to know? Not only for the exams, also for your everyday life. If you're a producer, what does it mean to you? Number one, it guides producers in pricing their product. If now after school you finish school and you want to start a business, and you find out that the product you're selling, it has inelastic demand. That means when you're increasing the price, you're not afraid. Because only few people stop buying. A lot of people buy and make your profit and you go away. But if you detect that the commodity you are selling has elastic demand, then you have to be very careful. That if I increase the price marginally, a lot of people will stop buying and I'll lose. Right? And especially when your commodities are substitutes or they are luxury. So if you're a producer, it gives you a very good idea how to price your product. So companies like Toyota, Nissan, Samsung, BYD, all these companies back in Europe, all these things, they take all these things into cognizance. Whether their product is elastic or inelastic before the price. Those who sell in the market, Makola, Akoglishi, Kajitia, Kantamanto, Kotokraba market, all these people, they take some of these things into account and they have to know whether their product is elastic, so that they are very careful in pricing. If it's elastic, if the price goes up marginally, I'm going to lose a lot of customers. They're not going to buy my product again. If it's inelastic, if I increase the price marginally, or if I increase the price, only few people stop buying, and I'll make my profit and go away. So these are very important, not only for the WASI, also for your everyday life. The knowledge on price elasticity of demand is used for price discrimination. What is price discrimination? Price discrimination is a practice where producers charge different prices for the same commodity to different consumers. Even though the product has the same cost of production. When the producer charges price discrimination is a practice where producer charges different prices for the same commodity to different consumers, even though the product has the same cost of production. What do you see? With price discrimination, the producer I produce something. The producer charges different price for different consumers, even though the goods is produced at the same height, it's produced the same at the same cost. For instance, maybe I'm producing cars, right? I've seen that the cars, if I take it to places where rich men are, I'll charge it, if it's $100,000, I'll charge them $150,000. But when I take it to a different country where the people there are not rich, they are not that wealthy, I'll charge it maybe $80,000. Why? Maybe they have different elasticities. In that rich environment, when you go, even if the price is too high, because they are rich, they still buy it. Because their elasticity is inelastic. If the elasticity is inelastic, the same product, I'll take it to different places and sell to them at different price, because maybe these people, their demand for my product is elastic. If I go and increase the price, they will stop buying it. But if I go and give it to different consumers in different locations, their demand might be inelastic for my product, and therefore even if I increase the price, they'll still be buying. So if the producer is able to fathom that these consumers, maybe going to take consumers in different countries, if he's able to fathom that consumers in different countries or different environment, this will have elastic demand for my product, this will have inelastic, he can do price discrimination. Those that have inelastic demand, you can charge them a higher price, and those that have inelastic demand, you will decide to charge them a higher price, and those that have elastic demand, you will charge them a lower price, so that he makes more profits. He takes advantage of their elasticity, different elasticities for their product. These people, their demand is inelastic, I will discriminate, I will charge them a higher price. These people, their demand for my product is inelastic, so I'll charge them a lower price. At the end of the day, he makes more profit because the product was still produced at the same cost. It wasn't produced at different costs. It was produced at the same cost, but he's charging different consumers different price because they have different elasticities. And this is done day in, day out in the market. Somebody can be in China or somebody can be in America, produce something and sell to different consumers at different price in different parts of Africa based on their elasticities of their demand. So the concept is very important for producers if they want to practice price discrimination. It's also good for producers if they want to price their product. Also, when it comes to shifting of tax burden, what they call the incidence of tax burden. That is the ability of producers to shift their taxes to consumers. If government tax me, can I shift it to consumer? If government impose a tax on maybe every product I sell, government sell to me. If I produce a product $10, government impose a tax of maybe 4 cedis, $4, right? I produce a product that's $10, government impose a tax of $4. Can I shift all these $4 to my consumers so that they will pay $14 for the product, so that I shift all what they call incidence of taxation, the ability to shift your taxes to your consumers? Whether the producer can shift all these taxes to their consumers or can shift part depends whether the consumer's demand is elastic or inelastic. If your demand is inelastic, you can shift all to them and they still buy the product and it's okay. If their demand is inelastic, if their demand is elastic, that means you cannot shift all to them. If you shift more and the price increase, once the demand is elastic, they will cut down their demand and that will affect his business. So the magnitude of the tax he can shift to the consumers determines it depends whether the people, their demand for that product is elastic or inelastic. If they take that their demand is inelastic and shift more of the taxes to them and they still buy it, if they take that the demand is elastic, he will shift small amount of the taxes, or he might not even shift it, so that the price is very low and keep on making his money. So it's good also for producers when it comes to deciding whether to shift their tax burden to consumers or not. IV, government taxation and subsidies. In the area of government too, it's very good for government too. Government decides on taxes. Okay, if I want to give taxes and subsidies, if I want to tax, which commodity should I impose more taxes? If I impose more taxes on goods that are inelastic, still they will buy. I'll make my tax revenue go away. And then let me impose more taxes on goods that are inelastic, so that I'll make my profit. Impose less taxes on goods that are elastic. So government is able to decipher which product is inelastic. Let me put more taxes on it. They will still buy the product. Which product are elastic? Let me put less taxes. Let me give you a typical example. In 2008-2009, during the media budget read in Ghana, the minister then said that all luxurious cars that have certain engines, they are imposing specific taxes on them. And the type of cars they were mentioning were cars that were used by the wealthy people who are wealthy in the society. So they impose taxes on them because they know that there are people who are rich men, even with a tax, yes, they will buy. And government do all those things very well. And look at the goods that are very inelastic, goods that is demanded by people relatively the wealthy class. They put taxes on it. Yes, so they will buy. In America, for instance, they are planning what they call the wealth tax. People who are millionaires and billionaires, they want to impose taxes on their wealth, right? So they think that they will still be moving on because they have a lot. People have about $100 billion and they can still be moving on. If the commodity has elastic demand, the government might decide to be very careful imposing tariff or taxes on it. Because if it imposes too much, people will not buy, and the government will lose. If people are not buying the product, government cannot make the revenue he wants to make. If government wants to give us subsidies, what are subsidies? Subsidies are the opposite of taxes, right? That is, instead of government imposing amount on it, government takes a part. In subsidy, government takes part of the cost of that production. For instance, you produce a product, the product is $10, right? You want to go and sell for $10. The government says, oh, go and sell for $2. I'll pay you the $8. So government take part of the cost so that the goods will be very cheap. So that's the opposite of taxes. In subsidies, government can give more subsidy to goods that have inelastic demand, right? Let me give more subsidy to goods that have elastic demand. Government can give more subsidy to goods that have elastic demand. Why? Because government think that these are goods that are demanded by people. When the price changes a bit, they will stop. So if I bring the price down, they will buy. So government can give more subsidy to goods that have elastic demand, because when the price goes down, they will buy more. And maybe probably a lot of people demand those things, and people are maybe probably economically disadvantaged. And therefore, if the price comes down, they will buy more. For me, that will propel productivity, production, and export. In the same sense, government may impose less subsidies. Government can impose less subsidies on goods that are inelastic. Because maybe government and these people, even if the price is high, they still buy. So there's no need to impose more subsidies, give them more subsidies on goods that are inelastic. So government can look at goods that are elastic, give them more subsidies, and goods that are inelastic, give them less subsidies. Again, so when it comes to international trade policies, international trade, government and international trade experts have to know your export and your imports. Is people demand for your export and import, is it elastic or inelastic, right? Is people's demand for your exports, let's see the country's export and your imports. Is the demand for export elastic or inelastic? Ghana, we export things, we export cocoa to Belgium, the kingdom of chocolate, to Switzerland. Is the people in Switzerland, their demand for our cocoa, is it elastic or inelastic? We import goods. The things we import, is it elastic or inelastic? It's very important for trade policies. Why? Let me tell you why. Because something in economy called devaluation. Devaluation is the deliberate decline in the value of a country's currency with the aim of taking advantage of trade. To make surplus. So I said that it is very important for international trade policies. For instance, if you export, you should be able to detect, is my exports, is it elastic or inelastic? What about import? The things my citizens they import, is it elastic or inelastic? Why? To take trade policies. One of them is what we call devaluation. What is devaluation? It's a deliberate decline in the value of a country's currency with the aim of taking advantage. With the aim of taking advantage of international trade to make surplus. Why? A country can intentionally devalue their currency. They will bring down the value of the currency. If 4 cedis were exchanged for $1, the country said, okay, let's make it 6 cedis to exchange for $1. That means you need more cedis to exchange for the same dollar, right? It was 4 cedis to $1. Now they have deliberately devalued their currency and make it that 6 cedis to $1. What means that now you need more cities to get the same amount of dollar. That means your country, the city have lost value. First, you're using 4 cities to get $1. Now you're using 6 cities to get the same dollar. So that means your currency have devalued. When your currency devalue, it makes exports expensive and import cheap, because people need more cities to get the same amount of dollar to import. So when they import, they become very expensive. First, when you have 4 cities, you can get $1. Now you need 6 cities to get $1. That means the value have fallen. You need more to get the same amount of money you were getting. Right? You need more cities to get the same quantity. If you need $100,000, first you're using 40,000 cities to get $100,000. Now the value we have lost value. So now you need 600,000 Ghana cedis to get the same $100,000. That means the country's currency have lost value. When that thing happens, what does it mean for trade? It makes your export expensive because people will need more money to bring it, and when they bring it, they will increase the value. Again, it makes your import expensive. Why does it make it expensive? People need more dollars to go and import the product, and when they bring it, it becomes very expensive. What about your exports? Your export becomes very cheap because if now I export things to Europe, when I come, I'll make more money. If I go and make first, when I bring $100,000, I was making 400,000 Ghana cedis. Now because the value have devalued, when I bring $100,000, I'm going to get 600,000 Ghana cedis. I'm making more. So if I'm can produce more and even reduce the cost. So it makes your export cheap. In your eyes of international market, your export become very cheap, your import become very expensive. When this happens, it's good for you as a country. If it's good for your country for 2 reasons. If the country produces more, that means you can produce more and make more trade surplus. 2, if the countries, the citizens, their demand for imports is elastic, then it's a good news for you. For a country to practice this and be successful, 1, the country should be able to produce more so that they can export more, because export has become very cheap. 2, import, your citizens, their demand for imported goods should be elastic. Why? So that when the price becomes expensive, they will stop buying. When the price becomes expensive, they stop buying. It favors you because you cut down importation and you save the economy. So for this devaluation to work perfectly, people demand for imported goods should be elastic. So that when it becomes expensive, they will stop buying. You know that when a commodity is elastic, when the price goes up, a lot of people will stop buying. So that it saves your economy from excessive import. But if their demand is inelastic, then you are dead. Because even though it's expensive, yes, so they will be buying more, and that will even worsen your situation. Like in Ghana, when things that are produced in Ghana, people doesn't like things that are produced in Ghana. Well, everybody wants things from Europe. If the thing is produced in Ghana, no, they say, oh, it was made in Italy, it was made in America or Canada. Such people with that mentality, this thing will never work, because if it becomes expensive, they will buy more. Because if the local product is there, they want to buy a foreign product because they feel that the foreign product is better. People produce things that are quality, yes, so people go and buy foreign product. Last time in Parliament, around 2014, they were changing the chairs in Parliament of Ghana. The ministers and other people, they went to buy the chairs from China, while there are a lot of good Ghanaians can produce chairs. This is the sort of Ghanaians you have. If you have such group of people in your country, and go and practice devaluation, your import becomes expensive, yes, so they will buy it. Because the demand for import is inelastic, and that will worsen your situation. So for you to practice this system, for you to devalue your currency, number 1, you should be able to export more, so that when the export becomes cheap, you export more and make more revenue. Number 2, your citizens, the demand for imports should be elastic, so that when export goods become expensive, they will stop buying, so that they save the economy from excessive importation. So you see that the concept of price and of demand is very important. It plays a sort of potential role when it comes to understanding how the economy works, for international trade, for government tax revenue, for price discrimination, for pricing a product, and for shifting of tax burden, what we call incidence of tax instead of tax. So it's a very important topic for your life. The knowledge is for your life. It's not for writing exams and passing. You need the knowledge. Maybe you might be one day you want to be a business mogul or this business tycoon or business magnate. And you need the knowledge on elasticity so that you can stay very long in business. So thank you so much. We are going to look at the other type of elasticity. We're going to look at the income elasticity of demand. First, let me say that we have all these lectures on a pen drive. This is the 12th lecture out of the 15. Get the pen drive for yourself. Go through all this and get abreast yourself with these issues. We have the book. All these things in the data response are in the book. We have written the book. All these issues in the book. We have in the book we have a web place where you can work. In the book we have a place where you can work. You have a place we have provided for you to write questions. You have questions you have set for you. You work and can mark yourself. We have over more than 200 to 300 objectives for you that have been solved in the book too. Also, we have the CD for you. Get all these things for yourself. You need the book, the CD, and a pen drive. So that you can be in the house, you can learn and write and go and get A without even the help of any teacher.